So, welcome to this special compilation episode of the Gabby Reece Show. Today, we're going to be diving into a topic that affects everything from your mood to your metabolism, and that's gut health. Over the years, I've had some incredible conversations with leading experts in this space. And in this episode, I've pulled together three of the most impactful ones. First up, you'll hear from Dr. Casey Means. She breaks down the connection between metabolism, cellular energy, and the modern health crisis. Then we're going to move into my conversations with Dr. Stephen Gundry, who shares some mind-blowing insights about the gut-mitochondrial connection and how your microbiome might be communicating with your body in ways that you've never imagined. And finally, Dr. Tyna Moore brings it home with a powerful discussion about stress, hormones, insulin resistance, and how our gut health plays a central role in midlife wellness, especially for women. This is one of those episodes that reminds us how everything in the body is connected. So if you've been trying to get to the root of your health challenges or just want to better understand how to optimize your energy and resilience, this one is for you. Welcome to the Gabby Reece Show. Let's go.
You know, we live in this incredible universe. And it's like, I think that just the mental shift of like, whatever, you pray to your grandmother, you know, the spirit, the source, whatever, your God, help me. I want to be healthy. I want a better life. I believe I can do better. That can be transformational because it opens up something in your brain of like, we're moving forward. Now to get more practical, it's like, I do absolutely think starting with labs is a great place to start because we all need to know where we stand right now on our health journey. And I think we talked a little bit about metabolic health, but I would say to people, you've got to understand your metabolic markers because in our country right now, in the way that we are sick, it's for the vast majority of us, metabolic dysfunction is a part of the problem. So each of us should learn to understand that. And I maybe just to back up, I'll just explain very briefly what metabolism is and why the book is called.
I always think, because people think of metabolism as like, oh, I have a fast one, I have a slow one, and they don't really, they don't really understand.
Yeah, we can make it so simple, but it is so important for everyone to understand. Metabolism is just fundamentally how you take food energy, which is the potential energy from outside of us, and in our bodies transform it to human energy that powers our cells. It happens in the cells in the mitochondria. If you remember from high school biology, the powerhouse of the cell, but it's taking that 70 metric tons of potential energy, putting it through our cells into a human currency of energy. Why is this important? Because we have over 40 trillion cells in our body. And what is our life? Our life is just the bubbling up of all the trillions of chemical reactions that happen inside of our trillions of cells every second. That bubbles up to our lives. All those chemical reactions require a currency of energy to pay for them. And that is what metabolism does. Food energy, human energy. And unfortunately, in the United States, because of a confluence of factors of our modern industrial world, that mitochondria is broken. So that process of creating human energy is dimmed. Our energetic force is dimmed in 93% of American adult bodies, 93%. And so what does that do? Well, if you have underpowered anything, phone, machine, city, anything that's underpowered is not going to function properly. A real first principles concept that people need to understand is that all disease and all symptoms must result from cellular dysfunction. You cannot have a symptom or disease arise in a vacuum. It's a result of cellular dysfunction. And so for many of the diseases we're seeing today, that dysfunction, it can be caused by lots of different things. But in 93% of adults, part of that dysfunction is a metabolic dysfunction and underpowering. And so for people who are like, okay, you're kind of making these big claims, you're saying that like all our diseases are related to this process. Well, this is the key. We have those 40 trillion cells, they all need power. We have 200 cell types in the body. So we've got our ovarian theca cells, and we've got our liver cells, and our kidney cells, and our astrocytes in the brain, our glial cells in the brain, and our endothelial cells of the blood vessels. We've got all these different types of cells. All came from one cell, which is pretty cool. But 200 different cell types. They all need power. Underpowering, a fundamental dysfunction, can look like lots of different diseases, because if you have underpowering in an ovarian cell, it's going to look different than underpowering in a retinal cell or a glial cell or a hepatocyte or a kidney cell. And so that's why this trunk of the tree is leading to all these different diseases, is because you've got the emergence of underpowering happening in different cell types. The biggest blind spot in healthcare is seeing all the diseases as totally separate things, because we classify them based on symptoms, not based on cellular physiology. And that's why the more we spend, the sicker we get, because we're basically, tweaking all these little symptoms, but not actually focusing on the trunk of the tree. We're not focusing inside the cell to actually fix the problem, which is fundamentally this mitochondria being broken. We have to fix the environment, because it's the environment that's hurting the mitochondria. It is the constellation of modernity across food, sleep, movement, stress, toxins, temperature, and light that synergistically, those changes, those rapid changes, are uniquely hurting the mitochondria. That is literally why the more we spend on medications, 200 million prescriptions for statins every year, heart disease is going up, because we're not focusing on the reason the cells are actually broken. So this brings us back to where to start. You got to understand your metabolic health. Where are you? Are you part of that 93% or not? And the beauty is you can understand that with 5 biomarkers that are usually free at your annual physical, but your doctor's not looking at them through a metabolic lens. So happy to talk through those.
I would like to say the 5, but also sometimes also the gauge that they say is normal is already too deep into moving towards sickness.
Yes.
So I think that's the other thing for people, is you don't want to actually land in average. You want to be way before. Yeah. And if you're over, fine, you can work your way back. But I think that's another problem, is our metrics is not one of, and I don't want to use the word optimal and optimum like an athlete. Mm-mm. And we were talking earlier about like everyone wants to hack their way to everything. And I too have a reaction to that. I know you do too. It's going, no, just for real human health.
Yeah.
Not like, so you can be your best and work all day and never sleep and that. I'm not talking about that, but people have to understand that they're what's being considered, hey, you're in the fine, safe zone. You might already be moving towards sickness.
That's right.
And so it's really important. And in the insulin test, it's like, because you can sort of show that you're insulin insensitive almost 15 years prior to diabetes showing up. Is this right?
That's right.
Well, we now know that bacteria talk to each other and can know how many of a particular of their kind have gathered in one place, and they have reached a critical mass where they decide to make their move. And so they literally wait till they have the right number of buddies, and then they make a move. And it was first discovered in how cholera worked. And now we know that these bacteria talk to each other. That's number one. Mm-hmm. Number two, which is probably even more startling, is that mitochondria, the little energy-producing organelles in all of our cells, are in fact ancient engulfed bacteria that were engulfed about 2 billion years ago, but they maintain bacterial characteristics. Their membrane is very much like a bacteria membrane. And interestingly enough, they have their own DNA, completely apart from the nucleus in the cell from, high school biology. Yeah. So they can divide within a cell without the cell dividing. So if you need 10 more mitochondria, 1,000 more mitochondria in a cell, then they can do that when they get the right stimuli. On the other hand, they talk, they get messages from their sisters in the gut. Now, why are they their sisters? Well, you, my dear, gave your children their mitochondrial DNA. I, unfortunately, gave my children no mitochondrial DNA. It only comes from the female. As you know, men are just drones. They're useless.
No. Yeah. No. I love men.
Oh, okay, good.
But maybe not for that.
That's right.
They're useless
They're
there.
they're useless for mitochondria. So what's really cool is you gave your kids their first dose of their microbiome, both through delivery and through your breast milk. And so you inoculated them with their community, and you gave your kids their mitochondrial DNA. So we're now learning that those bacteria talk to their sisters, the mitochondria. So there's literally a cross-chat between these two systems. And it's incredibly well designed. And that language is not text messages, obviously, but they're chemicals like short-chain fatty acids. And what's even cooler is that there are gases that do this communication. They're gaso messengers. So in my 2 books ago in the energy paradox, I said, step on the gas. So all this crazy intestinal gas, which we just thought was an embarrassment, is actually a communication system between the gut microbiome and the mitochondria and lots of other things.
I think, everyone can talk about the complexity and the sort of magic that is the human body, but it never ceases to really amaze me about all the intricacies about the way things work. And I can imagine as somebody like you who really understands it, or certainly a lot deeper than I do,
Tries to.
that it's like, oh, you've got to be kidding. So when you, just for an example, when we hear, okay, good gut bacteria, bad gut, and you're talking about this communication, and you sort of say, hey, we're waiting for enough of us to collect, to mobilize. Can you give me a scenario? Let's say if it's a good gut flora, that like, what is it doing then? Where is it going? Where are they waiting to all be mobilized to in the positive sense?
It's so complex. I like to think of it as a tropical rainforest is actually a really good example. So most tropical rainforests, most of these complex ecologies have a lot of similar principles. Now, a rainforest in the Amazon may be different than a rainforest in Florida, for example, but they share a lot. They may be different species, they may be different animals, but the interaction between all these species is very much the same. In the book, I use the example of Yellowstone Park to talk about an ecosystem, and I think it's a very good example. So a number of years ago, it was thought that wolves, which are one of the apex predators in Yellowstone, were nasty guys. They're bad guys. They were eating the elk, and they might be eating some cattle, but that's beside the point. We need to get rid of the wolves. And so it was open season on wolves. All the wolves were killed off in Yellowstone and got rid of the bad guys. Oops. What happened was, of course, that the elk overgrew because they no longer had their predator. They started eating all the little saplings for more food that they wouldn't have touched long ago. The saplings were used by beavers to make beaver dams, and the beavers had no saplings to make beaver dams. So the beavers failed, and the fish, which would be in the beaver dams, which were used by other animals, disappeared. And the whole ecosystem fell apart.
Right.
Lo and behold, when they reintroduced the wolves, this terrible, bad part of the ecosystem got balanced. And so one of the interesting things is that people get their gut microbiome checked and they're told, ooh, you guys, you have some bad guys in there and we need to get rid of the bad guys. Or you have SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and we need to kill off those guys because that's not right. Part of gut check is no, not so fast. We gotta have some bad guys in there to keep everything balanced. And without this balance, the whole system falls apart.
Yeah.
you're a high functioning female. When you've got a lot going on and you are used to being highly cognitive and having mastery over that, and it starts slipping, it's noticeable.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, I wonder if I just take a tiny baby dose and see what happens.
Do you take it with something else? Is it coupled with another?
Well, so I use all the peptides. So it's, there's bioidentical hormone replacement going on here. There's other peptides that, depending on, are we trying to regenerate tissues? Are we trying to quell neuroinflammation? What are we going after? And then what's the short-term goals? What are the long-term goals? Is this something that, and this was all independent of weight loss. Yes, I had about 20 extra pounds on me from all the stress. That was very nice to let go of, but that was not what my goal was. My goal was to get my brain back on, get my autoimmune disease under control, because during all of that, my psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis exploded and my spine was fusing. And I'm a very active person as well, and I couldn't move and I was in horrific pain. And I was like,
Is this all stress induced? You have a genetic predisposition for some of this, but meaning that's how you respond?
I think it was stress and
timing your age.
Shifts of, I'm 50 years old. So I was just hitting that shift where it's pronounced. It can be.
Hormones are a real drug. Everyone, like when people freak out about male behavior and testosterone, I'm like, I don't think we give it
no, it's
the honor that,
It's a shift. It's just one day things are okay, and the next day the wheels seem to be falling off the car. And I had been, my own bias as a doctor, I had these women coming into my clinic all the time who were our age, and I was in my 30s, and I, secretly in the back of my mind, I'm like, sucks to be you. Like, that sucks, But here's your hormones, and you're just not trying hard enough, like we need to do, you need to do more, or we need to do more. And they would say, I'm doing everything by the book. Their diets were more restricted than they needed to be. And this 20 pounds came out of nowhere. And that's kind of the beginning of the issue. I don't think people realize what low-grade insulin resistance leads to more severe insulin resistance. Losing your insulin sensitivity is kind of that's the root cause of a lot of issues. Sure. And then a decade later, they gain another 10 pounds, and our friends, like in our age group.
Yeah, they're always trying to tell me how it is and how it's going to be.
And it's real. And so it was happening to me. It was happening in real time. And I was like, oh no, I call it the thickening. I watched everyone in my family go through it.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's happening to me. And I tried harder. I tried harder and harder and harder. And it just,
that's more stress.
That drives the cortisol.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So wait, when you said that you respond this way, what are other ways that you have patients that they physiologically respond? Like you sort of suggested it was in more of a neurological way. Like, do people kind of manage stress? Like, how other ways does it show up?
Well, cortisol destroys your metabolism. So you start packing on the visceral fat, which drives more cortisol production, and you start to lose insulin sensitivity, and then you start to lose estrogen as you hit that age, that midlife age. That desensitizes you more to insulin. So you become more insulin resistant just by nature of losing some estrogen. And the whole thing starts to snowball. And I think it depends on a lot of factors. I don't think it was the stress that was happening just at that moment. It was a lifetime of, I have endured a lot of stress. And I was a single mom, and I was building a business. And so you kind of go through the gauntlet, and you continue to go through the gauntlet. And I think eventually it was like I kept trying to explain it to my friends. It was like a fuse blew. Yeah. Like a fuse blew. And it didn't matter what I threw at it. I have access to stuff. I'm sure you guys can get it too, but I have access to some regenerative, wonderful things that I can put in my veins and I can inject anywhere, and none of it was working. And I started studying the GLP-1s, and the first thing I noticed was that it quells neuroinflammation and it helps with neuroregeneration. So something that helps regenerate neurons in the brain. We don't have anything that does that. I don't know of anything else really that does that. I was like, that's phenomenal. Then I was realizing that it was healing metabolism. It's not just a Band-Aid at the time, but it starts to sensitize you to insulin. And I believe the longer people are on it, the better their metabolism is going to heal. So it's like any other peptide. It's not just at the time that it's doing its work. It inserts itself where it needs to go. And so insulin signaling improves. Insulin secretion improves, and it times itself better. Anyway, all of it was adding up. Then the cardio regenerative properties, pancreatic regenerative properties. It makes your pancreas work better because the pancreas starts to poop out. Everything atrophies as we age. Yeah. And then I was reading that I remember sitting on the couch looking at my phone and turning to my husband and being like, they're lying. It's regenerative to muscle. It actually induces muscle protein synthesis. It does not destroy muscle. That 2-to-1 ratio you heard is nonsense. Anytime anyone goes through severe caloric restriction or any kind of crash weight loss, they're going to lose 20 to 30% of their muscle mass. They're going to upwards and upwards. So that is just a byproduct of people wasting. And I think they're being dosed too high, too fast, and it's crushing them. It's crushing their appetite. They're not eating. They're going into a malnourished state and they're wasting away. And then they're not protecting their muscle, because getting patients to strength train is like pulling teeth. It's very difficult. And
when you say patients, do you mean all patients or women?
All patients, but women in particular.
They don't want to get too big. They're not familiar. The thing is, I think it's an intimidating undertaking if you haven't been introduced to it.
Right.
And also, they don't want to get too big.
Right.
That's my favorite line.
Yeah.
I'm like, do you know how hard it is to build muscle?
I remember I was telling you about my mentor. I was like, I don't want to get bulky. And he's like, have you seen Gabby Reece? She's not bulky. And I mean, this was back in the 90s. So.
I've been trying to get bulky for 30 years. Okay, so I just want to pick this apart just a little deeper. So do you use a compounding pharmacy? And if somebody goes, hey, because very few people are going to be as educated, and when you say slow, or do you have patients you've put them on to boost them and then take them off? Or is it sort of like, hey, I had somebody tell me once with the hormones, it's like, if those hormones have packed their bags and they're gone, like, then you will be on this for, this thing, whatever this is, forever. And I get that, it's just aging and time. So do you have instances that you communicate, hey, this is going to be something that if you want this kind of result, it's going to be forever, and other patients where you go, hey, we're going to give you a little start and then you can have the choice to come off?
I think it depends on what the short-term and long-term goals are. So if someone's trying to induce weight loss, we're going to treat it a little differently. If somebody, and again, they have to do all the things. All the things are not negotiable, meaning the sleep, the strength training, the nutritional interventions, prioritizing protein. I've been preaching that for way longer than it was cool. Like, I was telling people to eat meat and deadlift when when all the health, fitness, and functional medicine doctors online were telling them to do yoga and go vegan. So like, I get that whole thing. And that's been the premise of my entire platform for a long time. This is adjunctive. This is an add-on. Plus there's, we have to balance the gut. We have to make sure that the hormones are balanced. And if this is something that's helpful to them, depending on what they're using it for, if we're using it for, say, high blood pressure or autoimmune disease, then it's probably going to be something that they take long-term. But I cycle just like I do hormones, and just like I do peptides. I mean, nobody goes on like BPC 157 and stays on it forever.
Right.
You do cycles of it. You're in a regenerative cycle. You might be in a weight loss cycle. It depends on what our goals are. But I have no problem staying on this at a low dose forever if it continues to do what it's doing for me, and if it continues to do what it's doing for a lot of people.
Thanks everyone for spending some time with me. Hopefully you got something out of it. If you did, feel free to share it with your friends, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And also, I want to hear from you. Tell me what's working, what's resonating with you, and how you're getting it done. Keep going.